Cirque du Freak, a living nightmare. This will have my commentary throughout the chapter. Chapter 12. It is not true that all tarantulas are poisonous, Mr. Krebsley said. He had a deep voice. I managed to tear my eyes away from Steve and train them on the stage. Most are as harmless as the spiders you find anywhere in the world. And those which are poisonous normally only have enough poison in them to kill very small creatures. But some are deadly. He went on. Some can kill a man with one bite. They are rare and only found in extremely remote areas, but they do exist. In real life, all tarantulas cannot kill a person except if a person has a severe allergic reaction. I have one such spider, he said and opened the door of the cage. For a few seconds nothing happened, but then the largest spider I had ever seen crawled out. It was green and purple and red, with long hairy legs and a big fat body. I wasn't afraid of spiders, but this one looked terrifying. The spider walked forward slowly. Then its legs bent and it lowered its body, as though waiting for a fly. Madame Octa has been with me for several years, Mr. Krebsley said. She lives far longer than ordinary spiders. The monk who sold her to me said some of her kind lived to be 20 or 30 years old. She is an incredible creature, both poisonous and intelligent. While he was speaking, one of the blue-hooded people led a goat onto the stage. It was making a frightened bleating noise and kept trying to run. The hooded person tied it to the table and left. The author is stealing an idea scene from Michael Crichton. Michael Crichton wrote Jurassic Park. Tarantulas cannot kill goats. Seeing a T-Rex kill and eat a goat would be a lot more entertaining than seeing a tarantula poison a goat. A tarantula cannot eat a goat. It would be really funny that the goat is screaming like the screaming goats on YouTube. The spider began moving when it saw and heard the goat. It crept to the edge of the table, where it stopped, as if awaiting an order. Mr. Krebsley produced a shiny tin whistle he called it a flute from his pants pocket, and blew a few short notes. Madame Octa immediately leapt through the air and landed on the goat's neck. The goat gave a leap when the spider landed, and began bleating loudly. Madame Octa took no notice, hung on, and moved a few inches closer to the head. When she was ready, she bared her fangs and sunk them deep into the goat's neck. This is super cheesy. I like the T-Rex scene much better, if only Madame Octa was a T-Rex. The goat froze and its eyes went wide. It stopped bleeding and, a few seconds later, toppled over. I thought it was dead, but then realized it was still breathing. I guess it fainted. Actually, fainting goats have a disease that makes all of their muscles to spasm when startled. So, they fall over and look like they fainted. This flute is how I control Madame Octa, Mr. Krebsley said, and I looked away from the fallen goat. He waved the flute slowly above his head. Though we have been together for such a long time, she is not a pet, and would surely tell me if I ever lost it. The goat is paralyzed, he said. I have trained Madame Octa not to kill outright with her first bite. The goat would die in the end, if we left it there was no cure for Madame Octa's bite, but we shall finish it quickly. He blew on the flute and Madame Octa moved up the goat's neck until she was standing on its ear. She bared her fangs again and bit. The goat shivered, then went totally still. It was dead. Madame Octa dropped from the goat and crawled toward the front of the stage. I wanted it to eat the goat magically. Oh well. The people in the front rows became very alarmed and some jumped to their feet. But they froze at a short command from Mr. Krebsley. Do not move. He hissed. Remember your earlier warning, a sudden noise could mean death. Madame Octa stopped at the edge of the stage, then stood on her two back legs, just like a dog. Mr. Krebsley blew softly on his flute and she began walking backward, still on 2 feet. When she reached the nearest leg of the table, she turned and climbed up. You will be safe now, Mr. Krebsley said, and the people in the front row sat down again, as slowly and quietly as they could. But please, he added, do not make any loud noises, because if you do, she might come after me. Do I care if Mr. Krebsley gets killed by Madame Octa? No, I don't know if Mr. Krebsley was really scared, or if it was part of the act, but he looked frightened. He wiped the sleeve of his right arm over his forehead, then placed the flute back in his mouth, and whistled a strange little tune. Madame Octa cocked her head, then appeared to nod. She crawled across the table until she was in front of Mr. Krebsley. He lowered his right hand, and she crept up his arm. The thought of those long hairy legs creeping along his flesh made me sweat all over. And I liked spiders. People who were afraid of them must have been nervously chewing the insides of their cheeks to pieces. When she got to the top of his arm, she scuttled along his shoulder, up his neck, over his ear, and didn't stop until she reached the top of his head, where she lowered her body. She looked like a funny kind of a hat. After a while, Mr. Krebsley began playing the flute again. Madame Octa slid down the other side of his face, along the scar, and walked around until she was standing upside down on his chin. I was imagining that she was as big as a cat. I guess she is the size of a regular tarantula. Her size makes Mr. Krebsley and everyone else seem like they are scaredy cats. Then she spun a string of web and dropped down on it. She was hanging about 3 inches below his chin now, and slowly began rocking from side to side. Soon she was swinging about level with his ears. Her legs were tucked in, and from where I was sitting she looked like a ball of wool. Then, as she made an upward swing, Mr. Krebsley threw his head back, and she went flying straight up into the air. The thread snapped and she tumbled around and around. I watched her go up, then come down. I thought she'd land on the floor or the table, but she didn't. Instead, she landed in Mr. Krebsley's mouth. I nearly got sick when I thought of Madame Octa sliding down his throat and into his belly. I was sure she'd bite him and kill him. But the spider was a lot smarter than I knew. As she was falling, she'd stuck her legs out and they had caught on his lips. He brought his head forward, so we could see his face. His mouth was wide open and Madame Octa was hanging between his lips. Her body throbbed in and out of his mouth and she looked like a balloon that he was blowing up and letting the air out of. I wondered where the flute was, and how he was going to control the spider now. Then Mr. Tall appeared with another flute. He couldn't play as well as Mr. Krebsley, but he was good enough to make Madame Octa take notice. She listened, then moved from one side of Mr. Krebsley's mouth to the other. I didn't know what she was doing at first, so I craned my neck to see. When I saw the bits of white on Mr. Krebsley's lips I understood, she was spinning a web. When she was finished, she lowered herself from his chin, like she had before. There was a large web spun across Mr. Krebsley's mouth. He began chewing and licking the web. He ate the whole thing, then rubbed his belly being careful not to hit Madame Octa and said, delicious. Nothing tastier than fresh spider webs. They are a treat where I come from. He made Madame Octa push a ball across the table, then got her to balance on top of it. He set up small pieces of gym gear, tiny weights and ropes and rings, and put her through her paces. She was able to do all the things a human could, like lift weights above her head and climb ropes, and pulled herself up on the rings. Then he brought out a tiny dinner set. There were many plates and knives and forks and teeny-weeny glasses. The plates were filled with dead flies and other small insects. I don't know what was in the glasses. Madame Octa ate the dinner as neatly as you please. She was able to pick up the knives and forks, 4 at a time, and feed herself. There was even a fake salt shaker that she sprinkled over one of the dishes. It was around the time she was drinking from the glass that I decided Madame Octo was the world's most amazing pet. I would have given everything I owned for her. I knew it could never be because Mom and Dad wouldn't let me keep her even if I could buy her, but that didn't stop me from wishing. When the act was over, Mr. Krebsley put the spider back in her cage and bowed low while everybody clapped. I heard a lot of people saying it wasn't fair to have killed the poor goat, but it had been thrilling. No, it wasn't. He should have read and or watched Jurassic Park. I turned to Steve to tell him how great I thought the spider was, but he was watching Mr. Krebsley. He didn't look scared anymore, but he didn't look normal, either. Steve, what's wrong? I asked. He didn't answer. Steve? SSSHHH. He snapped, and wouldn't say another word until Mr. Krebsley had left. He watched the odd-looking man walk back to the wings. Then he turned to me and gasped, "This is amazing." The spider? I asked. It was great. How do you think? I'm not talking about the spider. He snapped. Who cares about a silly old arachnid? I'm talking about Mr. Krebsley. He paused before saying the man's name, as though he'd been about to call him something different. Mr. Krebsley? I asked, confused. What was so great about him? All he did was play the flute. You don't understand, Steve said angrily. You don't know who he really is. And you do? I asked. Yes, he said, as a matter of fact I do. He rubbed the jean and started looking worried again. I just hope he doesn't know I know. If he does, we might never make it out of here alive. I doubt that he knows about Mr. Krebsley. If he does, I don't think Mr. Tall or Mr. Krebsley would care.